Welcome to this 1-hour lecture on the latest improvements that we are doing in the area of Fiori concepts, Fiori design, and also how we bring it to the products. And I'm happy to introduce you to the topics that we are recently adding to our design languages in Fiori. My name is Emil Voutta. I'm part of the design organization, and together with the team of designers, we are hands-on working on all the concepts that you will see. And I'm always happy to receive feedback afterwards, because the things that you are going to see, many of them are still marked as lab previews. That's also because we are showing it to you in order to understand if this is meeting your requirements, if that's something that you're looking forward, and if there's some optimizations that we can still apply, then please feel free to get in contact with us. Every Fiori session starts with looking at our history, just briefly. Since 2013, we started with a small set of applications, just mobile, just a tablet in the beginning, and only some lightweight scenarios. We expanded the design language to desktop cases back then, and we covered even more complex scenarios later on. We invested a lot into notifications and the surrounding with a more sophisticated entry pages and things in the beginning, and we grew Fiori over time. The reason I'm always showing this is because you can see there's a constant evolution. So investments that are going into adopting Fiori apps, especially if you're sticking to our best practices, they will not be lost. We keep adding functionalities, we keep keeping the design system up to date, but it's not like we are shutting anything off or dropping functionalities. There's still a strong commitment, and we are staying true to our main values, especially pure user centricity. This is something that has not been the case with the older SAP UI technologies, where the GUI transactions were made for many different user roles. Fiori is purely user-centric and role-based. And we also want to enable the users to work with the different consumption channels, not only desktop and mobile, but also other technologies that are coming up that make it more natural to interact with the system. We have prototypes, for example, to use sketch metaphors to interact with the system, or this digital assistance as a new way of conversational interaction. It's always something that we keep in mind and that we incorporate into the design system, because we want to apply the same patterns that the users are knowing across the different channels. By now, this has led to an entire design system that is actually bigger than just a design language for one certain area, or for just the web or just the mobile. That's why we call it a design system in the end. And it's being realized via different technologies that are enabling then the product adoption and the product development. Taking a little bit of an architectural view at things, the design system is still based on people-centered values, principles, and practices. The design principles, role-based, adaptive, coherent, delightful, simple, they are still the same like in the beginning when we started in 2013. And the design-led development process is something that we use internally, but also together with our customers in the creation. And then in the upper part, you can see those three boxes. The design language for web, for native mobile applications, and for conversational user experience. It's all in this design system umbrella, but we have distinct languages in order to optimize for the given environment. And then in the lower area, we will get to that later in the presentation, we need to support different UI technologies, different frameworks in order to bring this design language and the concepts in there to life. And later on the lower boxes, you can see how the products are leveraging these capabilities. And also you, when you build your own Fiori applications, can base it on, first of all, the concepts, and second, the technologies. The first important part where we are making a huge step with Fiori 3 is in the area of consistency. You know, SAP in the last years acquired lots of companies, and each of those companies, coming from a direction of developing standalone products, brings their own user interface technology, but also the concepts, the paradigms, the layouts, the workflows. They all have their own ideas. Some are aligned with some industry best practices, but some are just designed in a way like how the product needed it by then. And it's in good experience if you look at it only if you look at single products only, but if you are a user that has to work with multiple systems, the issue becomes pretty clear that actions are not in the same place and the workflows are just working different, and you have to all the time look for stuff and learn it again. It becomes a huge problem if you look at the portfolio with all the products that we have in place. And this has led to some clear analysis on some of the building blocks that we are finding in those products. And we went to redesign those in a way that we brought all the products together and looked at it, did the status quo analysis, for example, for the shell bar, for example, for the home pages, and decided that we need a set of requirements that we all adhere to, that all the products are implementing to ensure that there's a better cross-consistency across the products. And it's not a matter of bringing everyone to our reference technology, which is UI5. It's also a matter of supporting those products who run on React, Angular, Vue, or any other UI technology, and allowing them to adhere to the same design principles and to the same design concepts. Because for the user in the end, it doesn't matter so much which technology is being used. If it works the same way, if it behaves similar, then that's what the users expect. So across products and technologies, and it's the user satisfaction and of course the efficiency as well that we are targeting here. And points like the shell bar, aligned icons, terminology, typography, action placement, and of course also the color, like the theme appearance, those are the things. And as I said, it's not mandatory really to move to UI5 to implement it. We are offering those specifications internally, and the products can then align with the concept, have their expansion point, expandable areas where they can add in their application-specific stuff, and some mandatory things that are set to be in the same position all the time. Shellbar is one example. This is the new theme that comes across with Fiori. You've probably seen it in many presentations already, because since the beginning of the year it is available as previews already in UI5, and other cloud products are, as I said, going the same direction. Having a theme selector like S4 has, for example, or all the products that are based on the strong UI5 framework, that's not part of this UX consistency requirements, but it's something that we are, of course, also supporting, especially from an accessibility standpoint. But what is mandatory for the products is that they are all moving to this Quartz Light theme. What we are also introducing to the products is some best practices that allows for easier theming capabilities. So we want to avoid that while this activity of moving to the new visual design is happening, we want to avoid that there's hard coding of color values to buttons or wherever, to the UI controls. So we have this strong semantic parameter set that allows to dynamically bind those color values against the parameter set. Iconography, another thing. You can see that's all those small things that we are doing, and they are adding up to each other. So the alignment on the iconography is, for example, that a plus always looks like a plus, that a notification icon is always this bell, not any other kind of interpretations or other metaphors. Sounds like a small thing, but for the user it's definitely less cognitive load if he knows already the bell is the notification sign, for example. And we are doing the same thing with the terminology. We have a little bit longer list than you see it here of terms, and we have described really clearly what they are doing. So an accept is always an accept. And the difference between deleting and removing an object will always be the same. Not for some random reasons we use a remove to permanently delete. No, the remove removes an object, let's say, from a table, but the permanent deletion of an object, for example, will be always called delete. And the action placement, I think this is a pretty important one because it's something that we get feedback all the time. If the actions are all over the place, users have a hard time finding and finalizing actions, getting workflows done, things like that. And action types, semantic actions, primary actions, those are just some best practices that we are bringing to those products who don't have these kind of action types in the products at all. And yeah, just the placement of the actions towards a global, contextual actions, finalizing actions, that's a huge cleanup for the application experience. And it's not something that we will see in the future. Really, the products are already going that route. It's beyond where UI5 is used. It's beyond S4 or the core products that are already on Fiori these days. It's really tackling also all the acquisitions, all the products that are in the C4 portfolio, for example. And I'm really glad that we found this joint approach to designing on what Fiori 3 is, and that the products are all moving in that direction now. Since we take care of UI5 as our reference technology, we are also taking care of those application building frameworks on top of UI5, like Fiori Elements. And we already made sure that Elements is also UX compliant. So for people using Fiori Elements, they don't have to take care about migrating to the UX consistency standard manually. We are also looking into bringing classic applications for S4 up to date and apply those things that you saw earlier here as well. The UX consistency, you saw it. It's basically a cleanup in the portfolio, and some basic user experience aspects are making its way into the products by now. But on top of that, Fiori 3 offers a little bit more, especially in the area of integration and intelligence, when AI and machine learning is being used and changes the way that we are working with applications. So the three main values: consistency, you saw that already, integration and intelligence, that's what I'm going to talk about a little bit more about. As a rough overview on the integration and intelligence part, central entry pages, Copilot as a central instance, enterprise search, and also a central inbox for tasks and work items. Those are the main integration points. And then on top of that, we are looking into how does the user want to work with AI, machine learning, rankings, automations, any kind of dynamic behavior in the context of Fiori apps. How can we improve bringing information to the user in a way that it's already pre-processed and decision taking is the real thing that the users can focus on rather than hunting for data? How can we improve analytics, and how can we bring even more complex scenarios into a coherent experience that is also covering workspace use cases like marketing campaign planning, for example. We are also happy to introduce that we will have a dark theme available with Fiori. It's not consistency relevant, I would say, because the light theme is the default theme. But for the products that have theming capabilities, we have this dark theme currently in preview phase, but it'll soon become available, and it will be part of the theme designer as well, of course. And this is only possible because we have this strong theming foundation. I was talking about this parameter set in the beginning. What you want to achieve in the end is that there's one central instance where you have the theme designer can either make it quite efficient to define entirely new themes out of the box, but also find a convenient way for you as the users, as the customers, to implement your own theme extensions or your own appearance or your own flavor and make it available to the users next to the ones that we need from an accessibility standpoint as well. Yeah, I mentioned the central entry pages. And here again, you saw it in the beginning in the status quo analysis. Every of the products brings their own homepage, and they are pretty much focused on the verticals, very product-centered, because they were developed to be standalone products. But since they become part of the intelligence suite now, it is important to move to a different paradigm, because what the users are asking for is, I want an entry page, I want a work environment that focuses not on how the products are being cut. It should focus on what I need as a user, what my workflows are, and what is the environment and the data functions and data points that I need to look at. So user and workflow centricity. And the second thing that goes hand in hand with it is exposing more information and ideally even business action on the entry level already. That's the feedback that we got all the time with the tiles, or we are still getting it for the Fiori Launchpad. A title and like a small KPI or a micro chart is not enough for many cases to really understand, do I need to take action, or what's behind it. That's why, in addition to the tiles, we will offer cards on the Fiori Launchpad, and we have a set of 7 initial card types for analytics, object lists, tables, activities, things like that. For phase 2, we are looking into even exposing business actions here, so that you don't only get rich insights, but you can even get stuff done on the entry page directly. We call this the Launchpad Spaces concept, where you will be able to have multiple of those spaces arranged around certain business roles, certain needs. And what they will be able to do is like really mix and match the content from different products, where the products are moving into more becoming content and feature providers rather than being this monolithic application that you saw in the beginning. And not only the cards, we will also improve the navigation capabilities with this multi-level navigation that allows you for all those integrated products to also do this, the multi-level navigation as an entry point to the applications. One question that we get all the time, of course, especially for the people who know Fiori already and who are familiar with overview pages in S4, for example, is how do the overview pages and these spaces relate? Because the card metaphor we introduced already with the overview pages. Well, the difference is the overview pages are intended to be for like the overview for one business domain. This means that the content that we are showing on the overview pages is pretty similar from a type. They will share attributes. Let's say it's my procurement overview, and it makes sense to expose filters on the top because you might want to change a view for the entire page. And if the content is pretty homogeneous, they can react to the same filter values. If you have completely different content, then it's lockout situation, then you can't really use a filter system there. And that's where we are going with the spaces. We are intending it to be a really heterogeneous environment where content and features from different parts can come together. We're still looking into if we can merge it in the future, but for now there's good reason why we have it in parallel. Domain focused and cross-domain. For analytics, you've seen it also with Elements already. We are strongly believing in these embedded analytics cases where the casual users get some analytics capabilities at hand, but only to get the job done quicker. The emphasis is not on the data exploring, it's really finding the right data points, the right objects to then take action and get the workflows done. But on top of that, with the integration of Analytics Cloud, you also heard it in Jürgen Müller's keynote, we are introducing so-called analytical page types for monitoring, reporting, planning, and exploring. So for more sophisticated analytics cases, where those users who are in that area will still not be disturbed by another experience that we are bringing in, everything Fiori 3 compliant, and also targeted as a best practice for these 4 usage types. The consolidation of tasks, I mentioned it already. Some of the products have tasks to do, work item, whatever concepts in place. We are also harmonizing here, and the thing that we want to achieve first is that there's this one place to go for the user where we collect the different workflow items from multiple products and expose it in one list. And since we think this is a really important part for the user experience, we are also thinking about this progressive disclosure of information and embedding it into the shell header that you can access it from everywhere and you get a glimpse of what's going on, and you can of course then launch the full application and understand what's going on. This is the target design. It's intended to cover all the products. We will start with a set of products in the beginning, S4 of course, coming with an inbox app already, but for example showing success factors and field glass, and it will grow over time. But we consider these 2 things, like the central homepage and the central inbox, as crucial to meet the user requirements, and it's all based on the feedback that we are getting. We need an integration that allows us to build a work environment for the user that really meets his user role demand. Another integration concept, of course, and we use it all the time, every day, is the search. Every product brings a search mechanism, but it's not aligned. The search results are looking different. The behavior is a little different. And that's also something where we are looking into, again, also integration into the shell, of course, and then visualizations of different search types, reusing the information architecture that we are also using for the cards metaphor. I did mention that on top of those integration concepts, we are also thinking in how do we deal with AI and machine learning and automations, and how does this work together with those patterns that we have invented for Fiori since the last 5-6 years. And we came up with a new pattern that in the end is targeted to dynamically compose application screens. The idea behind it is that there's a rule framework. In the beginning we start with a rule framework, but it'll self-learn over time, of course, where the system does the data hunting and connects some of the data points that you can find in multiple applications, and processes and composes then the situation page that tells me, hey, this device malfunction or this shortage in delivery is going to happen. Something that is of course possible as of today, but the users have to look in different locations throughout the system, and then they use spreadsheets to collect the data. And some of the things are already foreseeable in certain business domains. And that's where, together with some of the products, we developed this kind of framework to make it easier for the user to understand certain situations. So there's always a trigger, in this case a staffing issue. There's always some contextual information that you would need to look into different applications in order to understand what's going on. And then there's usually multiple ways to solve it. So a solution proposal is also something that the system can give. Not in every case, of course, but in some cases there's even more than that. And then there's ranking mechanisms and a little more, I'll get to that in a minute, that tell the users what could be done about it. Here's another example from S4 about the device malfunction, connectivity to IoT sensors. And what we are introducing here is really the way on how to deal with this kind of information that causes this, that might cause this malfunction. How do we bring this to the user without destroying the information architecture and the application experience that we have in Fiori? That's why we always look at the entire Fiori ecosystem as this kind of information architecture where we need to hook in, and we have to be careful about bringing all this dynamic behavior, because people rely on how to use a list report and object page, and they have this kind of structures in mind. We want to make it more dynamic, we want to make it more proactive, but we don't want to destroy this very structured information architecture that Fiori brings. That's why in this case of the situations, you will still be able in the upper left here to take a look at your object page that gives you all the details about this robot arm, this product, but we will hook in if this if there's some relevant information regarding delivery or regarding some supplier issues, things like that. And then from there, the user can access that information, clicking on this small marker, gets some more information, like progressively disclosing some of the information what's behind it, and then you just saw the full 360 view. That's something that the user then can also access. Yeah, there's a few other mechanisms where we are merging user experience for AI into the existing application patterns. Here you see a regular list report on the left side, but there's this one column that has some ranking information on it. And it's a very handy tool for, in this case, managing suppliers to understand which one is the one to choose for giving a contract, for example. But it's only worse, or the user feels only in control if you are able to explain the user what has led to this ranking. So when there is this ranking indicator with this is the best option, what are actually the involved parameters that have led to this conclusion? And this is very crucial when we are bringing this functionality into the applications to make this information available to the user, because this is what will build trust in regards to AI, in regards to automation and machine learning. Users will learn how to use how to use the information, and users will learn to really leverage then this dynamic behavior, and they will not be afraid about it, because that's something that we encounter in user research that we did with the first ideas on how to automating behaviors in the UIs. They always want to get to the bottom to understand, is this a trustworthy proposal? Here's another example, similar behavior. We are looking into those patterns, because if we wouldn't come up with a universal pattern on how to deal with that, the applications would do it in completely different ways, and that's of course something that we want to prevent. It has to be foreseeable for the user should feel in control, and thereby this kind of information, how it's being arranged, how you interact with the lead scores in this case, is as similar as the ranking that was done in the managed supplier example. Yeah, then the conversational experience. We talked about Copilot in the past already a lot. It was often associated with voice interaction, but that's not the main point. What we want to achieve is an interface that is more natural to use, where you engage with the system in a way like you would engage with humans in a conversation. And you start asking a question, you get an answer, and this sparks a new idea that you kind of have a follow-up idea. And then you get into a conversation, and sometimes you end up with something completely different than what you were starting with. And in the end, It's also an interesting layer that can enable the seamless integration of different products into one thread that has nothing to do anymore with those verticals of the products. The guiding principle here is the conversation and building up this train of thought that is very natural to deal with. User intent based, seamless interaction, and of course a very natural way of dealing with the system. That's what's behind. And especially this user intent thing. Many user roles don't want to click themselves through the hierarchies of applications with list report and then object page and then dive into the details and so on. They know what they wanted to see in the first place. Usually they use the search for that, but this is the more convenient way. In order to also get it to the products in a way that it's not behaving different, and also if you want to look into that and start building bots and conversational experience, we have a dedicated section in our Fiori guidelines for that, giving you an idea on what are the foundations about intent disambiguation, dialogue model, and all those things, and which UI elements you still need. Because these cards that we are also exposing there, they are a very handy tool to express huge insights. In the end, we don't see this as the one and only experience. We see it as a complementing experience. We consider the user sometimes being in a specialist role where he has a lot of domain expertise, where he is completely fine with having complex applications that are very powerful, exposing a lot of data and stuff. But then there's other things that he only does like on a maybe monthly basis or quarter basis, and knowing some very specific data that he wants to see has a specific intent in mind. And then we need to have a more natural, of course, but also a more efficient way in order to get to the data. A way that the system can be a little bit more proactive and give a little bit more guidance on how to get some things done, like time reporting that I do only by the end of a quarter maybe for some roles, or accessing some learning materials, or things like that. Last but not least, I mentioned these 3 design languages in the beginning. Web, we looked at the new stuff that's coming for the web. You saw what we have in mind with conversational experience as a complement to the very structured approach with apps. But we are also investing in the native mobile experience. Fiori is adaptive. The applications are running in the browser, also on the smaller devices, on the phone and so on. But when you need to access some device capabilities, make use of some operating system capabilities, that's where the SDKs are coming in. And we have a partnership with Apple since quite some time. By now we also have a partnership with Google, and there is SDKs available, merging the Fiori design language with the design paradigms and also the technical capabilities of both platforms. Just to give you a quick update in what's new on the iOS side, we are proud that our Mentor app just got a huge update. This is a great tool if you are not yet familiar with Fiori for iOS and you want to understand and what are the enterprise qualities that we are bringing with the Fiori iOS SDK and how to start designing, what components are available. I would encourage you to download that app and play around with it. We are adding a few new UI components and of course the dark mode and some color alignments in regarding to the colors that you saw in the beginning coming from this UX consistency activity. We are also bringing that to iOS. Similar thing for Android. The Mentor app is not yet available as far as I know, but it should be soon available in the Play Store. Again, great tool to play around and to understand what is available. And there's also a few new things on the UI component side, like map view, hierarchy view, where we have some enhancement, and those are available now. There is also an MDK that allows you to deploy into the 2 different platforms. But from a user experience perspective, I have to say, if you want to really make use of the device capabilities and operating system capabilities, the SDKs are right now the way to go and to achieve the best user experience. Okay, that was a lot of content already on new things with Fiori 3, on new things with the native environment. But the next thing I wanted to talk about is how does the experience-led development, the design-led development, how does this look like? And how do we also apply it internally to get to new applications? And it ties into this entire picture of the design system. In the upper box, in the practices, that's where we consider the design-driven approach is a crucial thing that connects the capabilities we have in the design concepts, in the UI frameworks, and what is necessary from a business side to make it and to adopt it into the product. Maybe many of you have already seen this process, a design-led development process. It's along those three phases of discover, design, and develop. And in the discover phase, we always start, of course, with setting up the team. And it's important that whatever you do is not a design-centric or not a development-centric approach. You need to bring those different expertise together, business expertise, development, technical side of things, and also the design, the advocates for the user. Sometimes you are lucky enough to have unicorns that can maybe represent design and a product or development and product, but those are the rare ones to find. We encourage design thinking methodology to first of all get an understanding of the environment and get everyone on the same page on where you are going. And then we have a few things that we are also asking for the internal before the internal development of applications is starting. And this is an outcome of those design thinking workshops, of course, understanding what is the persona we are targeting with the application we're doing. What is the role, what are the goals, what responsibilities, needs, things like that. You don't need to overdo those methodologies, but it's important to get all the different involved people on the same page that this is the guy that we are developing for, not senior management in the company or not IT or wherever. This is the person we have to think about when we create the application. And the next thing is the app definition. What is the app really intended to be, and how does it solve the problems that we saw earlier that this persona is looking for? Key features, which line of business, target role. These two things we use to ensure to not make the same mistake that we did in the past. Because with SAP GUI, we used to have one application that was so feature-rich that it can solve multiple business roles. Sounds maybe good from an IT perspective because you only have this one application. From a user perspective, it's a nightmare because you are overwhelmed with stuff. And people who use it since 30 years, okay, maybe they don't have an issue because they have all the hotkeys and shortcuts in mind. But people who are exposed to this kind of experience for the first time, they have really a hard time in figuring out what is the relevant function for me. And maybe there's only 1 or 2 buttons on the screen that is overloaded with 30 buttons that is necessary to get the job done. With the app definition and the persona in mind, you will really limit what makes its way to this one app that you are building. And you might understand that, okay, if we want to cover the feature set of this one transaction, we need to decompose it into multiple Fiori apps that are more use case tailored and more user-centric. Okay, after that is done, you start with the design phase. And there's some fundamental questions here to ask. Things like, what is the workflow going to look like? Because this is what you then have to match with the information architecture and with the structure of the application that you are building. You don't have to start from scratch, because again, we have our Fiori design guidelines for all the different languages. And if you go down the path, for example, to building a web app, you can get really comprehensive information that takes you from the step of having the persona, having the app definition, in getting you towards the producing a design out of that and seeing what is the Fiori way of doing it, how does it stay coherent and consistent with other applications. You will end up having some scribble, some kind of paper prototypes, some kind of clickable prototypes, high definition mockups. We provide you user interface stencils to do it. You will definitely have something at hand that you then can test with end users, because that's also something you should not forget about the process. As soon as you have something to show to those end users that you are designing for, do it, because this kind of iterations is usually making a huge step in meeting the requirements of the later users. You can, of course, already get into the UI technology part here. For example, use UI5 or even Fiori elements for some prototype implementations as well before you get to the users. But in most cases, it's really already great if you can express what you have in mind with some paper prototypes or some clickable mockups and get the feedback on that. Yeah, once you got the designs in place, it's then really easy to implement it with the technology, because the stencils that we are providing and the design guidelines, they are of course targeting and applying these technologies that we have, UI5 in the forefront, of course, in a way that it's also achievable and doable what you designed in the first place. And you don't have to do everything freestyle, because with the Fiori Elements application framework, you can base on templates, and you don't have to get into all the details of UI5 development at all. This is a metadata-based approach that allows you to build compliant applications, consistent applications with all the best practices on how to handle table or mass data in tables, variant management, filtering, things like that. You don't have to code that your hand. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can just use the existing templates. Of course, they are extendable, and it's something that we are heavily investing in, because it's the main tool also internally to produce Fiori apps. Just some more arguments for Fiori Elements, besides that we always like to emphasize it from a design perspective, because if you stick to the framework, then all the new stuff that we are introducing with AI, making that something that the frameworks can support. It's a very scalable approach, but also it allows us to really progress. And what we always want to do is that those concepts that I talk about all the time, that we bring it to the end user as fast as possible. And with this strong framework approach, UI5, elements on top, that's the way to do it. You as an owner, of course, you want the development efficiency. You don't want to fiddle around with UI development, because the core thing that you want to achieve is to help your business users. So the business knowledge is something that you need to put in, but you don't want to reinvent the wheel on the UI side, and also not on the design side. Trust me, we put a lot of design efforts into finding the best practices and putting these guidelines in place, and it's for the business scenarios, it's usually a suitable approach. Then the consistency, you will not compromise on consistency if you stick to the standards. And sustainability, you are safe with updates, with new versions of UI5, with new stuff that we are bringing into the frameworks. You will inherit it. You saw it in the beginning with this evolution of Fiori. This is for us a really important and guiding principle, that we are enabling this seamless transition towards new features that we are bringing. And for S/4HANA, this is the current experience. We have the Launchpad in place. It's already now, parts of it are now already available of this new update with Fiori. We have those domain-specific overview pages in place, and you can see that the details, the app level gets an update already. Just as a little outlook, I just said it, like for the current versions that we are releasing, the theme is there, the new shell bar is there, some navigation capabilities improved, some alignment on the iconography, the things that I talked in the beginning. And what's currently in the pipeline is bringing those cards and multi-pages for the entry page into the product as well. And the situation concept that I talked about, this dynamic processing of information from multiple sources and composing this 360 view of what's going on. That's also something where we already have a few examples in there. Pretty basics one, I have to say, but we are thriving to get the target design that I just showed you in place. There's one more thing in regards to S4 that I would like to mention, and that's the integration of Qualtrics. When our end users who are used to GUI transactions, or who are new to SAP systems at all, or for any other reason they want to give feedback, we need to make sure that this feedback is being incorporated into further product development. Yes, we do user research validations, but also in the real-life examples, we want to have a strong feature in there that allows us to understand what are the users looking for. So by embedding Qualtrics into Fiori and into the S4 environment, we will gather feedback through the Launchpad and through applications, and we will make use of the Qualtrics analysis capabilities and also their best practices with usability metrics and things like that to understand what users are looking for and how we can improve. We will then, of course, incorporate this after analyzing it into the roadmaps and then afterwards get back to the survey management to understand if those new features are perceived as improvements or if we still have to align. And this is the feedback loop that we want to close, and we think this is one of the first examples where we can incorporate Qualtrics in order to make the end user experience even better. Last but not least, I want to mention that all those concepts that you were seeing, and now me giving you an update on where S4 is going and how far S4 is with the adoption, you saw it already in the beginning. It's not only an S4 story, it's the story of all the SAP products coming together for the intelligent enterprise. And that's why we've also designed all those end-to-end scenarios, lead to cache, design to operate, total workforce management, using all those concepts that you saw in the beginning, and this defines the target design and where the products are emerging to. You can expect that there's different speeds in development due to UI technologies and technology stacks, of course, but for the first time, we have this one target design in mind that is committed from all the product areas, and that is seen as the target design that we are all emerging towards. UX consistency via the product standard is the first part of it, but the second one, these integration and intelligence concepts that we also use for those end-to-end scenarios, that's the next phase. And you saw it also in Jürgen Müller's keynote. He was using the screens and the examples from this design to operate scenario. Last update here, we just recently did an update of the Fiori product page, so lots of the stuff that I talked about is also available over here. You can even find out more, you can even find more information about how our colleagues from development are helping us to get Fiori into the products. And if you want to look something up that I talked about, please find your way to our new product page. With that, thank you very much. Thank you for your attention.